You're listening to Kerry Lutz's Financial Survival Network, where you get valuable information you just can't find anywhere else. To thrive in today's trying times, you need the Financial Survival Network, now more than ever. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and get your free newsletter and gift. Financial Survival Network, now more than ever.
Welcome. You are listening to the Financial Survival Network. It's September 3rd. Well, as somebody once said, the future just ain't what it used to be. And another one said, Yogi Berra in particular, prediction is very hard, especially when you're dealing with the future. But some people are going to predict and forecast no matter what. And that's the case with Eric Pilon-Bignell, a futurist and visionary. And one thing I like doing is talking about tech and what the world's going to look like in the future. What do you think the future is going to look like? Why don't you send us an email with your thoughts and try to keep away from pessimistic and negative perceptions. The future is always a mixed bag. The email address is kl@kerrylutz.com. Eric, it's great to have you on the show. So, you're looking ahead to the future. What is it that you're really seeing? What trends, and how do we make money off of it?
Yeah, exactly. Right. I think it's interesting. I think the future, we're seeing a lot of trends, and it's very different. We were chatting just quick, even before we jumped on here, the differences, right, even between this first industrial revolution where we created steam engines, and we have this, then led the second industrial revolution and third. And I think we're now in this fourth industrial revolution. And I think you make a great point in terms of what are the trends, but more importantly, what do we need for those trends to continue to progress? So in the first industrial revolution, we created steam engines. What did you want to invest in? You probably wanted to invest in, locomotives or building roads and distribution networks, or maybe food suppliers, right? Maybe not the specific, the engine itself. So we've kind of seen this all the way through. We talked about mass production, right? And Model T came out, and if you made, a lot of the auxiliary investments that allow those kind of, technologies to really take off is what we're seeing now. So, we've got a very interesting world that is obviously very fast now in this fourth industrial revolution, and we're seeing a lot of the specifics, the specifics in terms of technologies and these mega trends that we're really seeing explode. And I think the good question is, where are the opportunities that lie in around that, right? We hear all these mega trends that are coming: robotics, virtual and augmented reality, nano and biotechnology, material sciences, sensors, right? How does that look like when it's suddenly being augmented in 3D printing and blockchain and these global digital networks? And obviously the buzzwords like AI and these kind of, rogue disruptive waves that are coming through are also laying big potentials, right? Much in the same way the previous industrial revolution, we had semiconductors and mainframe computers, which sounds boring, but had you invested in personal computers, smartphones, and the internet, probably doing pretty well. We're seeing a lot of these similar patterns now, right? And we're seeing anytime we take a lot of these physical offerings and we digitize them, it's a first step of several steps that kind of lead us down there. And we're seeing it across the board, and it's not always something that you turn entirely into ones and zeros, right? It could be the obvious example is Peloton, which is a 200-year-old invention of a stationary bike, right? Peloton's value is not in the, $2,000 bike you buy. It's in all your data, and the fact that suddenly you get this world-class experience at the convenience of your house. But for Peloton, right, they now suddenly have 20,000 people cycling in a course versus, the 40 you can cram into a physical space. So we're seeing a lot of blurry boundaries of, kind of how we're progressing. And I don't think anyone can specifically, obviously, predict exactly which one's going to take off first. But, if we know what to look for, and we kind of understand through complexity sciences how a lot of these things emerge, which we call large events. Some of them are good, some of them are bad, right? Ecological crisis is one, stock market crashes and housing markets is another. But we also, can understand these trends in these exponential technologies. And when you kind of mirror both of those and you're looking for them kind of daily in your life, right, you're seeing small changes, which seem small, but when they're not on a linear path, right, 0.001 to 0.002 to 0.03, 0.04 doesn't sound big, but then it becomes, right, 2, 4, 16, and all of a sudden, we've got these huge companies that at first we didn't even know how to monetize them, but all of a sudden we've got these Facebooks and Twitters of the world with, these massive followings, which, is kind of a showing of how you've really got to kind of look and think through and trend, because, when you have that kind of mindset, it really helps you not just look into the future, but you can start to identify potentials and where you want to, put your own time, your own money in it, whether it's investing in yourself, right? Whether it's investing in the company you're going to, give the rest of your time to, which is your most valuable asset, or whether it's the stock you're specifically using in the stock market.
All right. So let's just talk about one trend that I think all of these trends you described are going to have massive effects on everybody on the planet. But one thing in our day-to-day drive, commute, self-driving vehicles. And, that is the largest segment of employment in the United States. Over 10 million drivers. We're talking limo, taxi, we're talking truck drivers, all of these people, whoever you are, who drive for a living. Self-driving vehicles really have the potential to change all that. What are you seeing here?
Yeah, and you know what? I think you make a great point, and it's not even the impact of the driving itself, which is massive, right? Truck drivers and taxis and all that. But what about all the other industries that also rely on that? So, like it or not, there are a lot of car accidents. There's 50 million people who are disabled every year from car accidents. There are when you're talking numbers like that, you are, in the U.S. alone, you're talking entire parts of the healthcare system that need that source of income, right? If we suddenly just automated everything, you'd be ripping out more than, people's jobs suddenly. You'd be ripping out entire markets. I mean, another great obvious one is insurance. And insurance is another great one, that's right. But all of a sudden, when you're saying these things and I'm looking and I'm thinking forward, I'm thinking, well, they are coming, and it's not going to happen overnight. And as long as we're looking for the change, we notice that. Our industries can't handle that. Our economy can't handle a sudden, overnight shift. But it is coming. And when you think about the fact that we call them accidents, yet most of them are human error. And if we can remove that piece, I think it's going to continue to trend this way. What are things you want to look at? I think insurance, healthcare, all these ones you said, these are big ones, right? Networks, for example. But the insurance one is a great one, I think, because when I think about that, so now you and me have an autonomous car, and, God forbid these things eventually will still happen, maybe way less, but they run into each other. Who's at fault here, right? Who do I sue if you hit me with your, if I'm walking and you bump me with your autonomous car?
Elon Musk, you sue.
Right. Yeah.
Sue him. He's got the money. But
exactly. But then, then is he going to go after AT&T and the network that failed? Or is it going to be the guy, the sensor distributor? Or is it, like you said, is it the car manufacturer specifically? And, how does that look like? And you can just see all these kind of new industries that are really going to have to evolve and completely transform and change, because the way we've done insurance for the last, again, almost 200 years probably has stayed relatively consistent.
All right. So here's the deal. Like, lawyers, all right, ambulance chasers, as being a recovering lawyer myself, I can refer to them in that disparaging term. Ambulance chasing, what is the world going to look like when we don't have ambulance chasers, or we have digital ambulance chasers? Right? If, like you say, the autonomous vehicle bumps into Joe Blow crossing the street, and then there's an automatic police report, the video is uploaded. That's the other thing. Like the Tesla, it's got 360-degree video recording accidents, and it kind of gets rid of the eyewitness testimony conundrum, right?
Another great example. And you're also going to have all the data. When you have all the data, to your point, whether, it's an ambulance chaser or whatever we want to call it, you run the diagnostics, you have all the data, you see when the G-force was applied, when the brake was there, and all of a sudden, really, it's just almost I can have my little AI talk to your AI, and they're just going to know who's at fault, and we can decide it from there. And then from there, we just have to decide who's to blame, right? We have a lot of trouble when we no longer have kind of control on these things, and our society hasn't really grown up and built that way. So I think there's going to be some major shifts, some definite major shifts there, and along with all kinds of of other connected kind of infrastructure things. If you see patterns, they repeat very differently, but they repeated through the industry. We mentioned quickly about this, and you picked autonomous cars, and we saw this steam engine and vast distribution networks and mass production in cars, and now we have these self-driving cars, which for the most part, will be electric, right? There is an entire electric infrastructure that needs to come along with that. Whether it's in your house, whether it's on the side of highways, what does that look like? There are, when you start looking at this, we can go all day, right? I feel like there's just investment opportunities all over the place. And these are, and again, Robinhood, you can go get your own, honestly, online app that you can apply for and you trade your own stocks if you want to have some, fun time taking some higher risk ones that, maybe have longer term payouts. But these EV infrastructure, charging stations, they're all in there as well. These new insurances are all starting to come out already, right? You can do your insurance entirely online. You get paid out almost immediately. There's no calls. There's essentially no paperwork. They're already doing it and this is kind of how the disruption works, certain smaller things. But like you said, eventually it moves up the food chain, right? That's kind of how the disruption works. So right now I can insure my dog entirely through Lemonade. It's entirely AI run. I never have to talk to a person. I put a claim as long as it comes from an accredited, vet who says it was, sickness, or it's automatically paid out. I don't wait. I don't call anyone. I don't do it. That's great. Right now that's for dogs and, you can insure your flights, but what's that going to look like, to your point, when it becomes, when there might be human lives or, someone hits something on my property, or how does that look, and how are those lines going to blur when there's large economic impacts, which, as we can see, especially nowadays, become very political issues as well, right? So now you've got so many things that are going to shape what this looks like, everything from politics to the economy itself.
Yeah, it's so true. And we've barely scratched the surface here, right? I mean, let's face it, we barely scratched the surface. So, but, Tesla is in the insurance business now, at least in certain states. And that I find kind of fascinating. I don't know that they can do it any better, but they seem to think they can.
Yeah, or they seem to just, it looks like, and if you kind of project forward what they're trying to do, and they've got a bit of a early start advantage, right? They're trying to almost own that whole ecosystem. Mm-hmm. Eventually they'll have driving cars. Then, they're trying to get into the insurance. You'll also notice that their bank now as well. It will finance your cars for you, right? So eventually, the more they can own, the more they can control, the more value they get, because they have all the data instead of, it being kind of sporadically outsourced across. And, eventually when you predict that forward, who are they going after? They're probably going after almost companies like Uber, because, you and me, we might own a Tesla, and there might be people who don't own a Tesla. Well, what's great is, while we're here talking, I just put my Tesla online into a self-driving network, and it runs around and it Ubers people around and makes me money while I'm sitting here and not using it anyways. And it's a win-win, because if we have more of those, Uber rides are now $2 instead of $12, because they're a lot more accessible. And ultimately, the big winner here is, to your point, Elon Musk or Tesla or whoever the EV kind of car is, because they are going to have all this data, right? And the more data, the more they can sell and surge, and they know when people want to ride, not ride. What does it look like? They predict, weather patterns, and all of a sudden they're in everything. And if they're insuring both sides of the house, it's easier to make it more seamless, right? Better customer experience. We just have to make sure it remains competitive, because we don't want, a monopoly in there where there's too much of. We don't want Elon Musk to control everything in our lives.
We don't? How about Jeff Bezos? We better off with Jeff or Elon, or none of the above?
Yeah, maybe none or both or all. I just think as long as there's some, I just find competition is usually healthy in those cases, right? Because at least there's someone keeping them honest in there. And I think in the past, there's going to be interesting issues. Things that used to be just run by governments now aren't. I don't know who's going to own Mars when they land there. Is it going to be the country? Is it going to be the company? Who is it? The person who lands? Who gets that right? Who owns that? There's going to be some interesting battles definitely in the future. And
all right, so we got all these trends. People are fighting it out. Just because you can pick the trend, though, doesn't mean that you can pick who's going to benefit most from the trend, does it?
Don't just survive. Thrive. The the Financial Survival Network.
Fury Gold Mines is a Canada-focused exploration and development company committed to aggressively growing its scalable, high-grade gold assets with major drill campaigns planned across its 3.5 million-ounce portfolio. Fury is led by a management team of proven explorers and developers with a track record of success in advancing and financing project development. Fury Gold Mines is well-positioned to create value for investors with low-risk development growth and the potential for a new major discovery. Fury Gold Mines trades on the TSX and NYSE American under the ticker FURY. To learn more, go to furygoldmines.com. That's furygoldmines.com.
This is the Financial Survival Network, the information you need to thrive now more than ever.
No, it doesn't. And there's so much more that goes into the trend, because your point's great. It's not even just who has the best technology anymore, right? There's economic problems, there's political problems at play, there's all kinds of factors. I think in general, what you want to be looking for in trending is, and I think like everything, you want to be smart, you want to diversify. If you really do believe in something and you want to make a play in that place, I wouldn't pick one, electrical car charging station company. I'd probably pick the top four, hedging my bets, hoping one of them takes off. But anytime we're going from the analog and we're moving into, tangible physical realm, into ones and zeros, that's great. We've got this deceptive phase where it doesn't really take off as fast as we think it will, but, and that's, maybe self-driving cars right now, right? We all thought, hoverboards from Back to the Future and everything would be different, but it's not. But then the disruption starts to come in. We start to see these things happening, and that's we've seen it in entire industries, right? Kodak is a great example of this film company that lost to not other Kodak film companies. They didn't lose to camera companies at all. They lost to an iPhone, an entirely different market that was created and stuffed out kind of their customer. So when you start to see that disruptive trend, it's usually followed by like a demonetization of some kind. So, with new phones, one of my great features was I get pictures, right? Well, that's pictures become free, and they might not be as good as your Kodak pictures yet, but they're moving that way. You might want to start thinking about dumping some of those stocks and moving into maybe some more of the digital space. And I think that's a bit of what you can do is maybe trend a bit more what's going to come with these new electric cars. And that is a bit of the future. And what are some of the things now that maybe, you want to lighten up possibly your portfolio, and you don't want to be investing in some of those that, have probably been blue chip stocks for the last 100 years or so, right? Since kind of the cars. How are we starting to, and again, I don't think it's a rip and shift, but, maybe if some of them are, you're selling into some strength and changing your positions a little bit because you're understanding some of those, right, with some of that demonetization comes dematerialization. If you look at banks, for example, in emerging countries, they don't have physical infrastructure. If you go to Africa, everyone does their banking on their phones. It's insane. Right. Crazy. More people have mobile phones and access to mobile phones in the world than they do toilets. And that's strictly because one's exponential and easy to move around, and toilets, you got to physically build a new toilet each time. And you know what I mean? So, all the infrastructure that goes along with it. So
more cell phones than toilets. Well, it's the kind of thing I wouldn't really want to be without either one of them. But right. I guess if you don't know from having a toilet or indoor plumbing, then hey, maybe you're better off if you can't have one.
Well, and when you look at that, right, there's a lot of infrastructure that comes in with a toilet and running water and all that stuff. Whereas the infrastructure, I drop a phone, as long as you got a wireless signal, you have all of that accessibility, right? So, we see a lot of those kind of trends. So I think to your point, I would never put all my eggs in the one runner, but, had you invested, for example, if we rewind, like we chatted about quick, these semiconductor mainframe computers and these, personal computers are coming out. If you invested in smartphones in general, you'd probably done, if you put all your money in Blackberry and stayed long on it to the end, that's probably okay. But right, yeah,
too. Those are two you really didn't want to stay into long term. But there was a time when they were highly, highly profitable.
Right, or if you diversified, and Apple was one of those four, you have made enough money on Apple alone to justify any losses you would have ever made in any of the other ones, right? Because that stock has just, I can't remember the numbers in the last 5 or 10 years.
My sister had put in $800 into Apple and never sold it. And, she sold her shares like 5 years ago. and that 800 was like $350,000.
I know.
So, but that was over like
it's 40% up since then.
Yeah, and yeah, she sold and the thing's been up. But in any event, it served its purpose well. $800, turns into $350,000, and she had like 100 shares. It was $8 a share, and that turned into like 3,500 shares and 350,000 at the time. So we know this. So what do you think the three biggest trends coming at us in the future decade or this century going to be? Self-driving, I think we agree on that. What about the concept of aerospace planes? Imagine if you can fly from the U.S. to Japan in under an hour. All right. That's faster than a commute from Long Island to New York City, or from where I am to Miami. It could be faster than that. So you can get halfway around the world. That's going to be profound, isn't it?
Yeah, there's going to be all kinds of pretty incredible travel. And to your point, it changes the entire landscape. So now all of a sudden, I don't need to live downtown Miami if I can, and I'm going to take even a more local example. If it's a 20-minute Uber flight, now all of a sudden I'm okay in being in North Florida. Actually, maybe I'm okay in even being in Texas, right? Or anywhere I want to be. Maybe I'm okay doing an hour commute and living up in Virginia. And all of a sudden, now we're not, maybe as dependent as cities and infrastructures. But what does that look like if we have less or more people moving into cities, or people are happier working remote, and this disruption changes aren't just technical ones. For example, like it or not, we clearly aren't ready to adapt quickly to, infectious diseases, which aren't but COVID kind of blindsided us a little bit, and we're still recovering, but it's also made this major change in industry. Now all of a sudden everyone's working from home, right? So there's people who understood this digital transformation, there's people who understood that eventually we were going to work more in this blended hybrid world. They were, going in hard on the Teams and the Zooms, and, Microsoft made a big investment on this. You're seeing a Salesforce buy up all the other video players, all these guys, and again, 2 years ago, it wasn't, none of us wanted this to happen, right? And this is a bit of a forced hand on it, but it would have happened maybe over the next couple of years anyways. And COVID just kind of fast forwarded that into like a 1 year period where we got to get back to work. We got to, start turning the economy again and, paying our bills. So all of a sudden there's all these great companies that, maybe you would have thought was a 5-year play that turned into a 1 year play because we need this now, right? We need to work in two different places at once. And then I think when you expand in that, now all of a sudden we're going to be able to commute. And, I don't want to harp on Elon Musk here, but he did make this and then just made it open source. But there's also, these hyperloops they're discussing where you can move, literally across half the US in 40 minutes in your own car. It's just a frictionless tube that kind of shoots you out. And now all of a sudden, not so bad to work downtown LA if I can get in and out in 40 minutes and live in another state.
Yeah, looking forward to the Hyperloop and the, the rudimentary beginnings are taking place in Vegas now.
Right.
But that could be pretty profound if you decide that you want to work in an office, which is becoming less and less necessary as time goes by. Right.
Or, I'm more than happy to live in Nevada and pay Nevada taxes instead of California. And if I have to be in the office twice a week, right, for maybe our board meetings or team meetings or some in-person stuff where we still want the, collaborative white of the eyes of, remembering we're still human kind of things, that's not so bad. I can take that Hyperloop, twice a week for 30 minutes. That's not the end of the world. Whereas that might never have been an option 10 years ago, for example. So I think there's so much more disruption that comes along with that. And I think, the aerial stuff is there. I think 3D printing is a big one. So when I think of 3D printing, it literally, prints like a piece of paper, but builds you something. And yes, 3D printing can build houses and large things, but it also does small scale things as well.
Sure.
Like in the space station, they don't send a splint up when an astronaut breaks his hand anymore. They send him the file and he prints a 3D splint. Well, he has a splint all of a sudden. Well, once we do that, back to your point, if 3D printing catches up, we don't need all of a sudden to be driving around and distributing large amounts of physical products. We don't need to be storing large amounts of physical products. But you can just see these entire industries that are going to shift. I don't think they ever kind of disappear, but they change very much so. And it brings up bigger questions, right? If this keeps happening, we keep turning over our kids' generation, you're going to have a 5-year lifespan until something new comes out. Do they re-educate? Are we re-educating people, or are we just, saying too bad and move on? Or what does that look like? Yeah. There's just a lot of neat pieces that come in there, and education's a great one. We're seeing this move to a lot more on your own schedule, from home learning, especially when you get into a lot of the AIs and the cognitive computing. It's actually change your experience. Learning would be different than mine, because it's scanning your retinas, it's learning your tendencies, and it's engaging you. And the more you're engaged, the more you learn. And so all of a sudden, we've got kids who might actually enjoy learning and going to school instead of what we had to do when we got to sit there at 8:30 and sit in English class or something.
It's going to be interesting, that's for sure. Eric, just tell us your book and how we get it.
Yeah, the book is Surfing Rogue Waves. And it parallels surfing in life and the disruption we're going through. And a rogue wave is when multiple waves collide and has this, oftentimes violent emergent reaction. And it kind of just walks through what that looks like in our future. And we don't know exactly when, how, and what order, but we know that these waves are coming and they are going to emerge. So we want to make sure we're positioning ourselves the best way to surf those disruptions as they come. So it's Surfing Rogue Waves, a compass on how to navigate the disruption of the fourth industrial revolution, and it's available at all your leading bookstores, Barnes & Noble, Walmart, Target, as well as Amazon and most online retailers as well.
All right, sounds good. And there's a link to it in the show notes if you want to get the book. And if you got a question for Eric, just send us an email to kl@kerrylutz.com. Don't forget to go to the website, financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Sign up for your free newsletter. Eric, definitely interesting conversation. We'll see what the future looks like. Maybe the future will be more like it used to be, right?
That's right. We won't know till we get there.
All right. Thanks so much. Be well.
Thanks, Kerry.
Thanks for listening to Kerry Lutz's Financial Survival Network, your solution to today's trying times. For the latest, go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Financial Survival Network, now more than ever.